Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, well, we're cracking open something powerful, the kind of decision science usually kept behind CEO doors. We're going to point it squarely at your life.
Yeah, taking those strategic blueprints, the ones executives use, and actually applying them to the choices that really matter for you personally.
Exactly. Our mission today, to help you systematically build an extraordinary life. And maybe just as important, to help you get rid of decision regret for good.
It's a big promise, but the tools are there.
Okay, so let's start by just unpacking the sheer scale of this. We all feel it every day, right? That mental fatigue from choosing. What to wear, which email, it adds up.
It really does. And the number's kind of staggering when you hear it.
Yeah.
Research suggests the average adult makes something like 35,000 choices every single day.
35,000. Wow. That's almost unbelievable. Just thinking about it is exhausting.
It is. But here's the kicker, the really crucial part from some Harvard Business School research. Out of all those thousands of daily choices, only about 100, maybe 100 total, across your entire life will fundamentally shape everything.
Just 100, that few, yeah. We're talking the big ones. Career paths, who you marry, where you choose to live. You know, the pillars that define your long-term happiness, your financial future, everything. And here's the thing that's, well, frankly, a bit terrifying when you think about it. Most people tackle those huge, life-altering 100-point decisions using the same random gut feel emotional process they use to pick, like, what cereal to buy at the store.
Exactly. Relying purely on intuition when the stakes couldn't be higher. It's where we really need rigorous, systematic thinking, but we often just go with our gut.
And the result? Well, they're measurable, aren't they? There's data behind this.
There is, and it's compelling. The research shows people who use structured, repeatable frameworks for these big decisions. They achieve, on average, something like 89% better life outcomes over 10 years.
89% better outcomes. That's massive.
It is. And they experience 67% less decision regret. Think about that. Less time looking back, wondering what if.
So the takeaway isn't that you need more luck or even more information necessarily.
No, not usually. You probably have enough information. What you need is a system, a strategic way to weigh what you already know.
And that system is exactly what this deep dive is all about. We're sharing this strategic decision-making system. Think of it like turning every major personal choice into a kind of business case analysis.
Taking that executive decision science and putting it to work for you, because really you're the most important asset you manage.
Okay, so first things first. Why does our default mode, our intuition, fail us so often on these big, important choices?
Well, it's a common trap. People often confuse just gathering more and more data with actually making a systematic decision. It's that endless research mistake, right? Analysis paralysis.
Yeah, I think we've all been there. You just keep digging, thinking one more article, one more conversation.
Exactly. One more Reddit thread, and somehow the perfect answer will just magically crystallize. But it rarely does.
You end up with tons of raw data, like a warehouse full of stuff, but no actual plan or structure to build anything with it. You're just hoping for clarity.
And clarity comes from structure, not just more volume.
But hold on. If, evolution gave us instincts and intuition to survive for millennia, why is it suddenly so counterproductive for these modern, complex life decisions?
That's a really good question. Intuition is fantastic for what psychologists call type 1 thinking, quick pattern recognition based on past experience, like slamming on the brakes when you see brake lights flash ahead.
Right, instant reaction.
But these major life decisions are often novel. They involve complex interacting variables that just didn't exist in our ancestral environment. And that's where our cognitive biases kick in. Professor Daniel Kahneman's work is foundational here.
Ah, yes. The biases. Can you give us an example? How does a specific bias mess up a big life choice?
Sure. Take the availability heuristic. Let's say you're thinking about starting a business. If all you see online are these super dramatic stories of overnight success or maybe equally dramatic stories of total flameout.
Yeah, the extremes get all the attention.
Exactly. Your intuition grabs onto those easily available stories and overweights them. It kind of ignores the vast, maybe more boring middle ground where most actual success and failure really happens. A systematic framework forces you to look beyond those vivid anecdotes.
So it makes you look at baseline probabilities, quantified risks, not just the latest viral story.
Precisely. It pulls you out of that emotional echo chamber.
So the insight here is that the top performers, the CEOs making huge calls, they aren't necessarily just smarter? They have a better process.
That's exactly what the research shows. Decades of studying successful executives. Their edge wasn't raw IQ, it was consistently applying systematic frameworks. They weren't trying to outsmart uncertainty, they were trying to outstructure their own human biases.
That's actually really empowering for listeners, isn't it? It means the blueprint, the system, matters more than just innate genius.
It absolutely does. Anyone can learn and apply a system.
Okay, let's circle back to that statistic, 73% less decision regret for people using structured processes. Why is focusing on regret so important?
Reducing regret is huge because regret is like cognitive debt. It's mental energy you're spending looking backward, second-guessing a choice you made months or years ago. It drains you.
Ah, okay. So the systematic advantage isn't just about maybe getting a better outcome.
Right. It's also about the psychological relief during and after the decision. When you use a system, you know you did your homework. You looked at the angles, you weighed the risks, you made the best call you could with what you knew then.
So you minimize that nagging what-if feeling down the line.
Exactly. You can move forward with more confidence.
Now, here's something that seems counterintuitive. You'd think being systematic means being slow, maybe bureaucratic, right? Risk-averse.
Yeah, that's the stereotype. But the research and, frankly, practical experience often shows the opposite.
Really? How so?
Well, these structured approaches can actually help people make decisions faster and with more confidence.
Faster. How does that work?
Because the framework gives you clear evaluation criteria up front. You're not wasting time in meetings debating how to decide or what factors matter this time. You just run the options through your established scorecard or process.
So the structure speeds things up because the rules of the game are already set.
Precisely. It allows for quicker analysis, faster commitment, and then you can move on to execution.
Okay, to make all this concrete, let's bring in our case study. Let's talk about James.
Right, James. He's 36, an engineering manager. Pretty successful, comfortable, maybe even a little bit.
Yeah.
Stuck. Secure job at a big Fortune 500 company.
Sounds familiar for a lot of people. Stable, but maybe not exciting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then, bam, he gets an offer that just throws a wrench in everything. A VP role at a fast-growing startup.
Okay, the classic dilemma.
Yeah. And the offer is tempting. Double the base salary. Huge potential upside with equity. But there's a big catch.
There always is. What was it for James?
Immediate relocation. He had to move his family, pull his two young kids, ages 8 and 11, out of their school and away from their friends.
Yeah.
Trade that corporate stability he knows for the total roller coaster of a startup.
Oof, that's a tough one. Security versus massive potential upside, but with real family disruption.
He was completely stuck. Classic analysis paralysis, just like we talked about. He knew he was doing the endless research thing, talking to everyone, making endless lists.
Spinning the wheels.
Totally. Crippled by the fear of the career risk, but also the very real emotional cost for his family. He needed more than just a pros and cons list. He needed a strategic way to break it down.
He needed the strategic decision-making system.
He did. He needed to treat this like the major investment it was.
All right, let's dive into the framework itself, 5 steps. And step 1, it seems simple, but you say it's foundational and often missed.
Absolutely critical. Step 1 is irreversible versus reversible classification. You have to classify the decision up front.
Why is that so vital?
Because it fundamentally changes the amount of analysis, time, and energy you should dedicate to it. If you treat a easily reversible decision like it's life or death.
You get paralyzed over small stuff.
Exactly. And if you treat a truly irreversible one-way door decision too lightly, well, that can lead to disaster.
Yeah.
Okay, let's define these sharply then. Type 1, reversible decisions. What falls in here? These are decisions you can undo or change course on without, catastrophic cost or trauma. Think reasonable cost, reasonable time. If you can test it, you should probably just try it quickly.
So things like trying a new software at work, maybe choosing a rental apartment in a big city where you can move again easily.
Yeah, or testing a new marketing campaign. Jeff Bezos famously called these two-way doors. If you don't like what's on the other side, you can just walk back through. The cost of reversing is relatively low.
Got it.
Then the big ones. Type 2, irreversible decisions. The one-way doors. These are the ones that are really difficult, maybe impossible to undo without massive consequences. Huge costs, significant time investment, permanent impact.
Examples here are pretty clear, right? Marriage.
Definitely. Having children, buying a house, especially in a market where it's hard to sell quickly, or making a major career change that requires years of retraining or abandons specialized skills you can't easily get back.
So for James, that job offer, It felt like a huge, irreversible type 2 decision, didn't it? That's
Uh-huh.
why he was stuck.
It absolutely felt that way initially, the relocation part especially.
But you mentioned earlier he ended up classifying the job decision itself as mostly reversible.
Yeah.
How did he get there? That seems key.
It was key. He had to break it down. The move itself, disrupting the kids' lives, that had strong type 2 elements. But the job changed specifically. He started analyzing his career capital.
Meaning?
Meaning, if this startup imploded in, say, 2 years, what was his backup? He realized he had a strong professional network, valuable corporate experience that was still in demand. He calculated his financial runway. Could they survive if he was unemployed for 18 months? The answer was yes.
Ah, so he separated the relocation impact from the career risk impact.
Exactly. He realized the career risk, while high, wasn't final. The finality was low. He could likely get back onto a similar corporate track if things went south. That single realization that it wasn't a one-way door professionally was what unlocked him. It allowed him to look at the opportunity rationally, not just emotionally. That's a really powerful reframing. Okay, that classification unlocks the analysis. Let's move to step 2, stakeholder impact analysis.
Right.
Because big decisions rarely affect just you. You absolutely have to formally identify everyone who has a stake in the outcome.
And not just identify them, but define how their interests are going to actually weigh in your decision.
Crucial. Ignoring stakeholders, especially the primary ones, is almost a guarantee of, well, maybe not failure, but certainly internal friction and sabotage down the road. You can make the strategically perfect choice on paper, but if your partner or family isn't on board, good luck implementing it smoothly.
So for James, who are the key stakeholders he mapped out? The primary ones were obvious. His wife, his 2 children, but he also included his current employer wanting to leave on good terms and, importantly, his future self. What did he want his career and life to look like in 5-10 years? That future self stakeholder is interesting, easy to overlook.
Very easy, but critical for long-term alignment.
Okay, so he identified them. How did he then translate their often emotional concerns into something usable in the decision, especially with family? How do you quantify worried about stability?
Yeah, you can't really put a dollar value on feelings,
Yeah.
right? That's not the point. He approached it more like negotiating the family's emotional budget alongside the financial one.
Emotional budget. I like that.
His wife's top concern was stability, yes, and the quality of the schools. But she wasn't against the income potential. The kids' main cost was losing their friend groups, their familiar environment. James had to weigh the severity and likely duration of those negative impacts against the certainty and size of the potential benefits.
So it wasn't just a list of pros and cons.
No. He categorized their input. Some things were non-negotiable criteria, like the school quality had to meet a certain standard. Other things were mitigatable risks, like finding new friends, which is hard, but possible with effort and support. That structured way of handling stakeholder input leads perfectly into step 3, success criteria definition. You argue this is where intuition really falls short. It really does. This is the anti-intuition step. So many people make huge decisions aiming for vague goals like I want to be happier or I need more money. Which sounds reasonable, but it's useless for actual decision-making. If you don't define what success actually looks like in measurable terms, how will you ever know if you achieved it? How do you compare options?
Vague goals lead to decision drift, you called it, if you don't know the destination.
Any road looks okay, and no road feels truly successful. James needed sharp, specific criteria.
Okay, let's hear them. What did he nail down for the financial side? Not just more money. Right. He set a floor. The total compensation from the startup, including the risky equity component, had to, at a minimum, maintain his family's current net worth growth trajectory. He didn't just look at the doubled salary. He rigorously discounted the equity value based on its risk and illiquidity. He discounted the equity. How much?
He required the initial offer for his calculations to be valued conservatively, something like 50% of its projected fair market value on paper, building in a margin of safety.
Smart. Okay, what about the career criteria? He wanted VP experience, but more specifically.
Specifically, he wanted P&L responsibility, profit and loss.
For listeners maybe not deep in corporate speak, what does that really mean for his growth?
It's a huge step. P&L means you're not just managing a function like engineering. You're responsible for the business results of a unit. It's revenue, it's costs, it's strategy, it's risks. It's moving from being a specialist manager to a general business leader.
Got it. A big leap in scope.
Massive. And his criterion wasn't just getting the title. It was gaining that P&L experience and an expanded strategic skill set within 18 months. A hard deadline.
And the family criteria, you mentioned non-negotiables.
Yes, these were pass-fail. Maintaining educational quality, which he defined using objective measures like school district rankings and specific program availability, and maintaining family happiness, which, again, he tried to make measurable.
How do you measure happiness? Not sentimentally. He used proxies, limiting commute times, ensuring proximity to parks or activities they enjoyed, and setting a goal for the kids' adaptation, defining success as, say, no major regressions in school performance or behavioral issues after a 6-month settling in period. Okay, so classification, stakeholders, criteria. Now you have the metrics. The next step is about preparing for what might actually happen. Step 4, scenario analysis.
Exactly. And the goal here isn't to perfectly predict the future that's impossible. The goal is to evaluate your preparedness, your resilience for different potential outcomes.
It's risk management, not fortune telling.
No.
Precisely. You map out 3 core scenarios. The best case, the expected case, or maybe most likely, and the worst case. And the point isn't just to acknowledge the downside, but to do something about it.
Yes. The crucial part is developing a proactive, concrete action plan for each scenario, especially the worst case. This forces you to confront the fear and then neutralize it with preparation.
So when James mapped his worst case, say the startup fails, he didn't just write that down.
No way. He wrote a specific protocol. If the startup fails within 2 years, what are the first 3 things I do? Who are the first 5 people I call? How exactly do I position this failure on my resume?
He planned the response before he even took the risk. That's the key. His plan included immediately leveraging the startup chaos for senior corporate roles that value crisis management, proactively pinging his old network contacts with specific asks, updating his resume to highlight the leadership and P&L skills, even if learned in a failed venture, and having a predefined budget for drawing down their financial cushion. By planning for the failure, he essentially made it survivable, manageable.
He took away its paralyzing power. He turned the unknown into a known, planned-for contingency. This whole process really seems designed to tackle the fear associated with big decisions, which just brings us perfectly to step 5, the regret minimization framework. Yeah, this is the final filter. It's more philosophical, maybe psychological. We borrow the core question from Jeff Bezos, famously. Will I regret not trying this when I'm 80 years old?
Ah, the looking back from the future perspective?
Exactly. It taps directly into behavioral science. Kahneman and others showed we're often more motivated by avoiding loss aversion, than we are by achieving a gain. This question flips that.
How so?
It forces you to consider the potential future pain, the regret of inaction, the loss of the opportunity itself. So you're asking your future 80-year-old self, which would sting more. Regretting the calculated risk that maybe didn't pan out perfectly, or regretting never taking the shot at all, that's precisely it. For James, once he'd done the scenario planning, step 4, and saw that even the worst case was actually manageable, survivable.
He had a plan for it.
He had a concrete plan. Then, asking the step 5 question, he realized the bigger, longer-lasting source of potential pain wasn't failing at the startup. He was sitting in his safe corporate job years later, knowing he passed up a chance for significant growth and a defining professional challenge, primarily out of fear.
The regret of inaction outweighed the fear of action.
Once the action was properly analyzed and de-risked, yes, that realization was the final piece. It allowed him to commit fully.
Okay, so we have the 5 steps. Let's see how James actually put this into practice. The rubber meets the road. He didn't just think about this, he executed it on a timeline, right?
He did. He gave himself a focused 4-week window to work through this huge decision systematically.
4 weeks. Seems tight for such a life-changing thing.
It forces discipline, prevents endless drift. So week 1 was all about laying the foundation.
Classification and risk assessment.
Yep. He formally classified the job itself as mostly reversible. He quantified their financial runway, exactly how many months could they comfortably live without his income if needed. He assessed the family's emotional capacity for the disruption. And he set those non-negotiable minimum standards for things like school quality in the new location.
Got it. Groundwork done. What about week 2?
Week 2 was intense focus on success criteria definition. Step 3, nailing down those specifics we talked about.
The measurable metrics.
It's exactly that financial threshold, accounting for the equity risk, getting that number right. The 18-month timeline for gaining P&L responsibility. The specific metrics for family adaptation, like the kids settling into school within 6 months. These became his shopping list, essentially, for the next phase, which was week 3, information gathering with purpose. You emphasized with purpose. Crucial distinction. This is where he actively fought against analysis paralysis. No more random Googling or just chatting aimlessly with friends. He sought out specific data that directly addressed the criteria and scenarios he'd already found.
Okay, give us some examples. What kind of targeted due diligence did he do on the startup itself? Beyond the hype, he treated it like an investor would. He pushed to see hard numbers. What's the current cash burn rate? What's the realistic projected runway based on conservative revenue assumptions, not just hockey stick graphs? What's the real competitive landscape? And what's the startup's actual, defensible, unique selling proposition? So digging into the fundamentals.
Deeply. And importantly, he didn't just talk to HR or the recruiter. He specifically interviewed 5 people, VPs, senior engineers, who had made similar jumps from large companies to startups. But he didn't ask, "Are you happy?"
What did he ask?
What were the biggest unexpected implementation challenges you faced in the first year? What broke? What surprised you? And how did you fix it or mitigate it? He focused on gathering intel about potential failure points.
That's mining for risk factors, not just success stories. Very different.
Totally different. Simultaneously, he was doing the legwork on the family side. Deep dives into school district data, community resources, even mapping out potential commute times to hit those family criteria.
And you mentioned he used the risks identified in his worst-case scenario during negotiations.
Yes. Because he knew the potential failure modes, he could negotiate specific terms to mitigate them. Things like asking for accelerated equity vesting tied to performance milestones, not just time, and negotiating clear severance terms up front, just in case the worst-case scenario actually happened.
Wow. That's turning the framework directly into leverage. Okay, so that focused info gathering leads into week 4.
Week 4 was all about consolidating everything into the detailed scenario planning and risk mitigation. Step 4, taking all that data and building out those concrete action plans we discussed, turning abstract worries into step-by-step responses. Let's revisit those plans in more detail. The best case, startup takes off, equity is gold. What was his action plan then? Not just celebrate.
Right.
The plan wasn't relax, it was maximized strategically. That meant having a plan for portfolio, rebalancing how much of the suddenly valuable but still illiquid equity should he aim to diversify, and when. It also meant immediately focusing on building a broader professional network outside the startup itself, positioning himself for potential future board seats or maybe even his own venture later. Success requires managing it too.
Okay. What about the expected case? Things go okay, good experience, decent growth.
His plan there was meticulous documentation, systematically, maybe quarterly, logging his specific achievements, skills gained, especially around that P&L management, strategic decisions made, headcount managed, building the evidence base for his next career move, whatever it might be.
Keeping his options open.
Exactly. And crucially, maintaining proactive, warm contact with his old corporate network. Not burning bridges, but keeping them open should he decide to return to that world later with enhanced skills.
And finally, the worst-case plan again, startup fails. You said he'd leverage the failure.
Absolutely. His action plan framed the potential failure not as an embarrassment, but as a badge of honor almost.
Yeah.
Intense executive-level experience in a high-stakes environment. Crisis management, rapid scaling, tough decisions under pressure. He had his resume narrative ready before he even started the job.
He pre-framed the potential negative outcome.
He did. He already had his list of target companies that value that kind of battle-tested experience, his key contacts lined up, his financial buffer allocated. He neutralized the fear of failure by having a robust plan for dealing with it.
So, armed with all this, the classification, criteria, stakeholder input, scenario plans, James took the leap, accepted the job, moved the family. What happened? Let's hear the results after, say, 24 months.
Well, the outcome was good. It actually trended towards his best-case scenario, validating the potential he saw. The startup landed a strong Series B funding round.
Nice. So his equity.
His equity value jumped significantly, something like 300% on paper. He got promoted to senior VP with even broader responsibilities. And importantly, the family did adapt well. The focused research he did on schools and community paid off. The kids were thriving.
So that's a great outcome, but the key insight here isn't just he got lucky and it worked out, right?
Not at all. The insight is that the system worked. James didn't make a perfect prediction. He couldn't have known for sure they'd get that Series B funding. What he did was make a systematic decision.
A decision he could fully commit to because he'd done the work.
Exactly. He had analyzed the risks, planned for the downsides, defined success. That preparation gave him the confidence to navigate the inevitable stress and uncertainty of the startup environment without constantly second-guessing himself.
And that confidence, that lack of internal conflict, probably contributed to the positive outcome itself.
Massively. If he'd gone purely on gut, that first tough quarter, that first funding scare, he might have panicked, hedged his bets, or even started looking for an exit. His commitment, born from the systematic process, helped him ride out the volatility and perform well.
Okay, James's story is powerful.